Good morning. Welcome to Mayor Andrew Young's daily media briefing. Before the mayor comes in, we have a little 3-minute presentation for you. Please let me introduce to you Mr. James Williams, Brian Joyce, Ron North, who are the homeless men from Austin, the Street People's Advisory Council, Roxanne Elder of the Austin Sane Freeze, and Dr. Vion McReynolds of the Texas Alliance for Human Needs. The mayor will follow them. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is James Williams, and I'm with the Street People's Advisory Council, SPAC. We're in Austin, Texas, and we're a high-pressure group. We put pressure on providing, we put pressure on providers that are dragging their feet. Homer is our mascot, and he's our goodwill ambassador here to the convention. We're here to bring attention that there's a growing population of homeless people and that there's a need for this to be public, and we're hoping that it gets on the floor. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions? Thank you very much.
I'm with Sane Freeze. We started working with the Street People's Advisory Council around a Build Homes Not Bombs, talking about transfer of military spending into human needs, specifically into housing and affordable housing issues and homelessness. There's also an affordable housing bill before Congress that we are trying to gain attention to here in Atlanta. The Street People's Advisory Council, the homeless men, were on the floor last night talking to delegates, trying to raise the issue of homelessness and make it a priority issue with the Democratic platform. Homer has been designated as the goodwill ambassador for the homeless. He started out in a hostage situation, being threatened to be eaten as a little gosling by the street people in Austin. We have a town lake that runs through our city, and during the winter, folks were concerned that the geese and the swans were not getting enough food and wanted city council to do something, and they decided to take a hostage and really make people pay attention to the folks who are homeless and hungry in Austin. And so we met Mayor Young yesterday. He invited us down here. We thought, as one former ambassador to Homer just starting out on, this is his first diplomatic mission out of Austin, that he might have a few tips to give Homer. The Street People folks have a T-shirt to present to the mayor when he gets in here. If there are any questions, we'd be glad to take them.
We'd like to impinge upon the press to get the story out there, because we're thankful that you come, but the only way that we're going to really get the information out is that you publish it, and that's why we're here. Homer's been designated as the Goodwill Ambassador and the Minister for Public Information, and he's been doing a real good job of getting us out there into the press. And with your help, we can get the homeless issue and get some major legislation through this Congress and through the different states across by publicizing the issue. And so I'm hoping that you'll pick up on the story and maybe tell some other people that, you know, Homer's going to be here. We're going to be down in the free speech area at 1 o'clock today and also tomorrow. And I understand today is Homeless Day, and so we're going to be down there with Homer trying to get the issue out there. And thank you for your support.
On Thursday this last week around the country, we started out with a Homes Not Bombs campaign in June. That was how Sane Freeze, which is formerly the Nuclear Weapons Freeze campaign in Austin, we merged nationally with Sane Freeze. Reverend William Sloan Coffin is our president. And on July 14th, this last Thursday, in 70 communities across the nation, there was a Take Off the Boards action where people, homeless people, physically took off the boards of abandoned houses and moved in. And in Austin, 3 men and a goose moved into an abandoned house owned by the University of Texas that has been encroaching upon a black neighborhood and just next door for the last few years. The 3 men and a goose were arrested. The 3 men were taken to the Austin Police Department, and Homer was taken to the Humane Society and detained for questioning. He was later released, and the 3 men here will go back to Austin on trial August 8th for criminal trespass, and we will be again raising the issue back in Austin. With all the connections with Lloyd Benson for the last several weeks, we've been hearing so much about the Austin to Boston connection. And one of the reasons we decided to come to Atlanta, one was that a delegate decided that Homer ought to be here and let the Democrats meet some homeless people and talk about the issue. The other thing was we wanted to make the point that the real Austin to Boston connection is that all over this country there are thousands and thousands of homeless people who are locked out of the American dream because they cannot afford a place to live. And so we'd like to bring that connection up, that really is the Austin to Boston connection. And then unless something is done, there is a growing crisis in this country that is going to impact every single city in every single state, and we want to make sure that something's done about it. Y'all may have been hearing about the economic bust in Texas. We're in the worst economic depression since the 1930s, and the folks who were on the edge a few months back have really fallen off of it with the bust. So anyway, we're here in Atlanta to raise the issue of homelessness and the need for legislation on affordable housing. And I think I see Mayor Young coming.
Good morning. One of the things that we were most anxious about as we anticipated the Democratic National Convention coming to Atlanta was our taxi service. And the chairman of the City Council Public Safety Committee that supervises taxis, Councilwoman Barbara Asher, began to work with our Commissioner of Public Safety and with our Taxi Bureau and developed a program known as Atlanta Ambassadors. I'd like Councilwoman Barbara Asher to come forward and give you a brief description of the Atlanta Ambassadors program.
Thank you. Good morning. Approximately a year ago, just about the time that we heard we were going to be the beneficiaries of the Democratic National Convention, the American Express Foundation approached the city of Atlanta about a taxi driver training program. It sounded like a good idea because I think taxis throughout this country are very often open to criticism. We began working with the taxi drivers that long ago, launched our program officially on March the 1st with a gala luncheon at the Hyatt Regency, sponsored by the business community. During the course of time, we raised over $150,000 from businesses in Atlanta to help support this program. The first class kicked off on March the 26th. We had a goal of trying to train 1,000 drivers prior to July 18th, the opening of the convention. We trained our 1,000th driver on June the 26th, and we now have trained over 1,100 drivers to be Atlanta ambassadors. The program basically is in 3 parts. We try to teach the drivers courtesy and professionalism, getting them to understand that working smarter is not something that they should not do, but it will put more dollars in their pockets. We have a segment on geography and route planning, and an extremely important segment on driver safety and self-defense, basically. There's a segment on teaching drivers how to avoid being held up, being robbed. It has been extremely well received. We anticipated, because it is a requirement for licensing in the city of Atlanta, that we would have approximately 40 drivers a week, those whose licenses were up for renewal. Instead, we have had 100 to 120 drivers a week attending the classes. They are encouraging each other to come, and I think those of you who've had an opportunity to ride in our taxis this week will see the fruits of our labors and will be greeted by very professional Atlanta ambassadors. Thank you very much. Yes, I'll be happy to. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Monica Guy with WSB-TV here in Atlanta. First of all, I've got a couple of things about the taxi drivers. I have heard some complaints from drivers that despite all the training they went through, the system is so different now that the convention is in town that they're just getting negative attitudes from police, and it's very difficult to get through the congested areas of town, and they don't think that the training program did them much good. Do you have a response to that?
Well, the training program is not designed to do anything other than to give them the tools to function more professionally. We are not going to be able to, in a very brief class, teach them to be London taxi drivers. What we can do is provide them with the workbook and the tools to learn how to work better and smarter. I think this week is very unique for everyone in the city, not just our taxi drivers. But I can't remember any time in my years in Atlanta where I've seen so many taxis actually riding around with folks in them instead of being lined up in the bullpen.
Do you all have any figures on accidents? I was downtown a couple of days ago. Taxi driver hit one of our visitors. She was taken to the hospital. A lot of these drivers are not used to driving, if they're from Atlanta, in congested streets like that with so many people coming through. How much of a problem has that been? Have there been a lot of accidents?
I have had no reports on numbers of accidents involving taxi drivers.
So as far as you know, it hasn't been a problem, or?
Nothing's been brought to my attention that it's more of a problem than it normally would be. I think you hit the crucial point when you're in a very congested area with people just going in and out, crossing lines of traffic. There is a higher opportunity for accident, whether it's by a taxi driver or anyone else behind the wheel of a vehicle.
Okay.
Are there any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. If there are any questions for me about the week's activities, if you'd go to the microphone and identify yourself, we'd appreciate it.
Mr. Mayor, Paul Crawley with Channel 11 News here in Atlanta. What's your assessment or response, if any, to the police situation involving some gay activists who were out at the demonstration area on Monday evening? And also, follow-up to that is your promise to make an appearance out there, whether in fact you're going to do so today.
The situation on Monday occurred, I think, and actually I think we're hoping that we can get some of the footage from Channel 11, because I understand that you have it on tape. And what we want to do is go over this with representatives of the gay community and the police and see if we can't determine exactly what happened. In general, I think the police have acted with great restraint, and I am very pleased with the overall conduct of our law enforcement community. On that particular occasion, I don't know what happened. But I think if that's an indication of the kind of manners that occurred, I can understand them on a hot day getting a little out of hand.
Mr. Mayor. Chris Duncan with Southern Voice newspaper. On the matter of a Monday afternoon with the lesbian and gay activists, now then, there were charges that over a third of the officers present were not wearing badges and did not have name tags on. Do you have a response to that? Do you know why they weren't wearing them? Do they plan on wearing them in the future?
I don't know, and I think that there have been several meetings yesterday with representatives of the gay community and the police department, and I think if that's the case, they should be wearing their identification. Now, they're also wearing, I think, some protective covering over their uniforms, and I don't know what the explanation of that would be.
Okay, and then as a follow-up, going back to Sunday's melee, do you see that Commissioner Napper will have to revoke anyone else's First Amendment rights to rally throughout the rest of the convention? Have you increased the police force?
Well, I think that what we started out trying to do on Sunday was hopefully to address the situation with a strong, visible police presence. But what we meant by strong would be 20, 25, 30 officers, which would be sufficient under almost any demonstration situations. We had a presence of 100,000 people in Piedmont Park, and 8 officers present. If the intention of the demonstrators is to demonstrate peacefully, 20 officers would be more than adequate. There was not an intention to demonstrate peacefully. There was an intention to demonstrate violently, and 20 police officers were not sufficient to contain several hundred persons who did not intend to obey the law. So that we basically suspended the rights of this one group and attempted to negotiate a situation that would avoid violence and a disruption in the city. From that time on, that's what brought out the large contingency of police officers in riot gear. It was the experience of Sunday that basically created the kind of attitude and the kind of police approach that occurred on Monday. And we're going to do what we have to do to protect everybody's rights.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm personally having trouble understanding how you can say that you were surprised when you were officially warned last Thursday that threats had been made through Commissioner Napper's office that something was going to happen, and it got way out of hand. How, where did it break down? Where did the channel of communications break down?
Well, we've had big demonstrations here before.
Yeah.
We've had demonstrations with the Klan without incident. We have demonstrations of the anti-Klan without incident. And I think that it was our hope that the normal respect that prevails in this community for people of differing opinions would prevail. When it was obvious that that was not prevailing and that there was an intention to provoke a reaction and confrontation, we reacted accordingly.
Mayor Young, my name is Rex Walkner. I'm a newspaper reporter with Chicago Outlines and the New York Native. I was one of the journalists who got trapped on Monday between an advancing wall of Atlanta police officers and another group of journalists. And I got squashed about 3 different times, lost a press pass, dropped my tape recorder, etc. It seems that the fundamental question involving this gay rights group from New York, which is called the AIDS Coalition to Unleash Power, or ACT UP, is whether or not they had a right to be walking on this sidewalk. And the police officers seem to be proceeding under the assumption that this group, ACT UP, had no right to walk on this sidewalk. Have you been able to examine this question?
I haven't really. we have tried to provide opportunities for demonstrations, scheduled demonstrations, organized demonstrations within a determined area. And I think that the line between whether it's walking on the sidewalk or whether it is a demonstration outside of the area is one that I think is almost left on that occasion to the discretion of the officers on duty. There's no question in my mind that it could have and should have been handled without an initial show of force. It should have been, first of all, handled by simply informing people that you can demonstrate, but we would prefer that you do so inside the demonstration area.
That brings up an interesting question. I mean, ever since I arrived in Atlanta, I've been a little bit perplexed by the concept of free speech being limited to one square block area. Can you comment on how that decision was made?
Well, it's not free speech limited to one square block area. It's simply free speech in the area of the convention being restricted to areas that don't interfere with the movement of traffic and with the movement of persons in and out of the convention. If persons wanted to come over here to City Hall and have a demonstration, they were welcome. But in order to accommodate people trying to appear in the area of the news media at the Democratic National Convention, we created a space as close to the Democratic Convention as we possibly could. Compared to in New York in 1980 and 84, well, 1976 and 1980, you couldn't get anywhere near Madison Square Garden with a demonstration. In San Francisco, you were 2 blocks away. We thought we were being accommodating by providing a space just across the street from the convention. And that position was upheld in a federal court.
One final question. This group from New York ACT UP has, if you determined that the Atlanta police officers reacted with unnecessary force after watching videotapes from Channel 11, and I saw it on CNN also, they've asked for an apology to the gay and lesbian community from you. Is that a likely outcome?
Well, I would apologize anyway. I have no trouble apologizing for police officers in the kind of conditions that they're in. And I apologize because we've got these guys out there 12 hours a day. They're in this heavy equipment. They're in this hot sun. And I think it's very easy to understand that, that somebody, for reasons that I don't understand, operated on too short a fuse. And I extend my apologies to the gay and lesbian community. At the same time, I really have been very, very proud overall of the conduct of our law enforcement community. We've asked them to function in ways that are far above and beyond the normal course of duty. And they have done so with great restraint and I think with great efficiency. And I think you can't put these things in isolation. If you had a normal gay lesbian demonstration on any other day in the city of Atlanta, it would have been handled totally different. When you put it on a day that occurs immediately after a confrontation with the Ku Klux Klan and what seems to me to be a kind of a left-wing fascist group, if that's not a contradiction in terms, then you come right behind that with another kind of confrontation with which they had to deal. And it's understandable that there could be, in that sort of situation, some breakdown.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, Ray Kluka from Etc. magazine here in Atlanta. 2 of the requests from the ACT UP people were that they meet directly with you. I know there were meetings that took place yesterday with Shirley Franklin and with Commissioner Napper. And also that, well, first of all, are you willing to meet with the activists?
I have no problem meeting, but let me just say, when you call yourself ACT UP, You're not going to get very far with me on that. And because if you come in here to act up at a time that we're trying to elect a president, I'm not going to be very, very hospitable. And I have all the sensitivity that I can muster. So, and we just, on the day before the convention started, had heartstrings which raised $500,000 for research and treatment of AIDS patients. And we are about the business of fighting and containing AIDS, but we're not encouraging the kind of behavior that will divide and stir up our community. We already are sensitized. What this kind of demonstration is doing is alienating people. And if AIDS is a disease, and we're treating it like a disease, and we believe basically that an acquired immune deficiency syndrome is a disease that's not peculiar to the gay community, you have no priority on disease. The common cold is an immune deficiency syndrome. And it's our position in the city of Atlanta that we have to get this entire community behind fighting this disease. We've done the best we can with the Center for Disease Control. We have had, for 3 years in a row, we had 80 corporations pulling together 3 years in a row. We started out with just a few of us, my wife and I co-chairing it. We gradually, the second year, we built it up till it was 8 corporate sponsors. This year we had 80 corporate sponsors. And what I see you doing with ACT UP is messing up what we're trying to do. And what we're trying to do is solve the problem of AIDS. And we're not trying to defend anybody's lifestyle, and I don't want anybody messing with my lifestyle. That's not the government's business. It's not the business of the press. It's personal life, and that's protected too under the Constitution. But when we start making an issue of lifestyles, then I'm not going to be very sensitive, and I just have to apologize.
Mr. Mayor, one other thing too, apparently some of the officers were wearing gloves at the demonstration, which in most people's minds is an affront on people with AIDS rather than any medically necessary step. Do you have a reaction to that?
Well, my reaction is that if ACT UP intended to be provocative, they succeeded. And I think by the definition of, by choosing that name, then there was an intention to be provocative. We've had a liaison with the gay community in this city for at least 10 years. Our Civilian Review Board, there's a liaison with the gay community that meets regularly with the police. Every one of our police training sessions is involved in some kind of sensitive training. The last 2 police commissioners we've had in this city have both come from the San Francisco, Berkeley area. So it's not something that we're new to, but like everything else in the city, we're trying to handle it our way. And we think that our way in race relations has worked. We're trying to handle labor relations in ways that are consistent with an Atlanta style of people cooperating and reconciling differences and working together. And we'd really like to have your help in working out an approach to the whole question of AIDS. But I think that we're far from perfect. We have a long way to go. But the problems we have with the gay community, for the most part, involve the police in protecting members of the gay community from assaults that come from people from outside the city. And so it's been a constant struggle for us, but I think we're making significant progress, and we just appreciate your understanding and support. But you have my apologies if we have not been sensitive enough.
Mr.
Mayor Young, my name is Hampton Pearson from WBZ TV in Boston. I'd be interested in your reaction to Reverend Jackson's speech to the convention last night. Also, in your own mind, where does the whole event fit in the civic and political life of this community, and also in the context of the civil rights movement, so much of whose history was made right here? There were thousands of people outside the hall. Wherever you went, people stopped and listened. Would you respond, please?
Yeah, I think that last night was a brilliant prophetic address. It was clearly in the tradition of biblical prophecy. It called us to be the best that we can be. And it challenged the Democratic Party to take seriously the problems that really affect people and the nation. And it challenged, I think, the kind of conventional wisdom that leads us to think that, you know, Contras in Nicaragua are our real problem in Central America. There was a consistent challenge to the conventional wisdom. It was a challenge that was a lofty challenge. One, though, that I think once the prophets have prophesied, it's up to the managers and administrators to implement. And I think the challenge to the party is to get elected. And I don't have any question. I believed and agreed with everything that Jesse Jackson said last night in principle. But once I become the administrator and the manager to try to get those things done, then I realized that financing them, reordering the priorities of, I mean, you just can't pull $150 billion out of NATO when there's a history of commitment. Most of these things will require competent management and serious discussions and negotiations. I think what Jesse Jackson was doing was setting forth an agenda that Michael Dukakis is probably the best person in our time, according to the Democratic Party, to implement. And I think that when we put those two together, and then I think you're going to see this party leaving here with greater unity and a greater capacity to fulfill and live up to that kind of Jesse Jackson challenge, but it's going to do so in a way that is politically responsible to our treaty commitments, to our allies, and to the security and safety of the globe on which we all live.
One follow-up. So, number one, you think the unity that we've been seeing since about noon on Monday is real, and it is not a political marriage of convenience born out of desperation to recapture the White House?
No, I do think it's real. But I think there's nothing more real than our desperation and need to capture the White House. And I think the same sort of desperation that we felt around the nomination of Judge Bork. People felt personally threatened. Black people felt personally threatened. White people felt personally threatened. Judge Bork was the kind of judge that was going into folks' bedrooms, defining their relationships to each other. So everybody felt personally threatened, and you had a political groundswell that, against all of the conventional wisdom, defeated Judge Bork. I think that's what we're seeing mounting up against George Bush. And I would say that given the kind of response we've had here in Georgia, which I think is typical of the South, I think a Dukakis-Benson ticket, one, will get Jesse Jackson support, but as important, if not more important, it will have Tom Murphy's support in Georgia. It will have Sam Nunn's support. It will have Weitz Fowler's support. It'll have Governor Joe Frank Harris' support. It'll have my support. It'll have the support of every mayor in the state. And that we can carry Georgia. I think we can carry, I'm certain we're going to carry everything from Virginia to Texas. And the only two states I have any question about are Florida and Tennessee. And that's because I suspect Bush might nominate a vice president from Tennessee.
Thank you.
Tony Dorsey, WSOC in Charlotte. Jesse Jackson talks about the locked out. Well, a lot of people joined the crowd last night outside the Omni. Hundreds of people were locked out, couldn't get inside, delegates. Do you think this, first of all, what do you want to say to all those people, hundreds of people who couldn't get in, among them the relatives of the Martin Luther King family?
Well, one of the things that we'd have to say, and as we said to the press, that we are having the first convention in the history of politics that essentially is a media convention. And the majority of the space in the Omni has been given over to providing media coverage for the almost 1 billion people around the world that are focused in on this convention. And I'm just sorry that we didn't get everybody in. I tend to think, too, that we've got about 15,000 seats in there, but we've also got about 15,000 news media. And the news media passes for the correspondents are almost the same as for the people who are handling the technicians. And I think what we had was a lot of people who normally would be working in the Georgia World Congress Center or who would be on assignment in other places deciding that that was the place they wanted to be that night. We were in a tough situation. Inside the hall, there was almost no standing room even in and around. The aisles were full. You could not see in the perimeter around the Omni, and I maybe shared in a calculated decision that rather than risk, well, first we were closed by the fire marshal. Rather than overrule the judgment of the fire marshal and overcrowd the place and create a situation where everybody would be uncomfortable and where nobody would really see, I thought that if we held up to the original standard that we set and that we informed the media of originally, that when we reach a certain capacity we're going to have to close, that most people would have gone over to the World Congress Center and would have sat down in front of the hundreds of television sets over there in very comfortable lounge surroundings, and they would have heard and enjoyed the situation, and I'd hope they'd arrange to get there earlier tonight.
One final question. Do you think that this is a blemish on the city of Atlanta? Do you think it's been, I saw it on NBC, ABC, all the networks this morning about the problems. Delegates were very upset, and it's all over the place. Do you think it's a negative image?
I tell you, we have been getting such good publicity. And I think that this morning was the first, I mean, I've even been getting good publicity about the taxi drivers. We've had no complaints up to now. And I thank God that we've gotten through 3 tough days. And if that's the only blemish we have, I am really grateful. And I apologize for people for not being able to get there. But I think overwhelmingly people are still feeling very good about this convention. But we have not said and we've not pretended that we're perfect. We just said, given the situation, I mean, there were 3 media satellite connections in the 1980 convention. We have about 115 16 now. The crunch and the demand on the convention process is taking away space that normally would go to delegates and visitors. But at the same time, it's opening the political process to truly hundreds of millions of people around the world, but 150 million people in this country that are going to vote have got to be our major target.
Mayor Young, I'm Denise Shannon from the Austin American Statesman. What led you to invite a goose to your media briefing, and what is Atlanta doing about its homeless?
Yeah, I met the home of the goose contingent yesterday, and they were trying to dramatize the situation of homelessness, and we have encouraged that. I think we are taking a briefing with our task force on the homeless. Today, Anita Beatty and Jim Beatty are taking a delegation of concerned Hollywood actors to visit our shelters and to take a look firsthand at what we're doing with the homeless. For the last 7 years now, we have had 51 churches and synagogues that have opened their doors to the homeless. the city runs, in addition to that, 3 or 4 shelters that we open in the winter to handle the overflow. We feed between 14,000 and 20,000 people a day in our meals program, and we have training programs for particularly women and children who are homeless, that try to provide them not only with temporary housing, but during that process give them some kind of training and help them to find both daycare and jobs to get free of the situation in homeless. So we are working on it at a lot of levels. It's largely voluntary, and we've gotten very little, if any, state or government support.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
WPC TV in Pittsburgh, Patrick Walsh. I would just like to get back to Reverend Jesse Jackson. What do you see in his future in the Dukakis White House?
Well, I would say that the role that he charted for himself last night and that he's been charting for himself through this week is, I say, the role of the prophet to the king. And that's not an uncomfortable role. That was sort of the role that Martin Luther King had in relationship to John Kennedy and Lyndon Johnson. Before that, it was the role that Frederick Douglass had in relationship to Abraham Lincoln. And Frederick Douglass lost power when he accepted an ambassadorship. I probably diminished my influence by accepting a position to the United Nations. But I was sort of in that position in the Carter administration. I think that part is very clear, that Jesse is going to continue to be the conscience of this nation on critical issues, particularly pertaining to human affairs.
Mayor Young, Greg Freeman with the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. Looking at last night's convention, Reverend Jackson's speech, the significant speech given by Bill Gray, what do you see as far as the future is concerned of blacks involved, not only in the Democratic Party in the fall, but in government and politics in the future?
Well, I see the black community realizing gradually over a period of time and building up into this election that the only way into the mainstream of the American economic dream is through political enfranchisement. I think not only have you seen that in this campaign, but I think you've seen that in the election of black mayors across the country. I think you're going to see, already are seeing a series of announced candidates for statewide office. Doug Wilder in Virginia, Roland Burris in Illinois, Tom Bradley has run in California, as has Merv Dimely, served as lieutenant governor. It's pretty certain that we will have somebody running statewide in Georgia. And I think we can see politics going to another level. And that will be Democratic Party politics. So far, there is, however, a Republican, black Republican running for the Senate in Virginia. It'll be interesting to see what kind of support he gets from the Republican Party.
Can I follow that with a question very quickly? The name Colin Powell has been tossed out as a vice presidential possibility with George Bush. If, for example, the Republicans do select a black to go on the ticket as a vice president, do you think that blacks will go Republican in the fall?
I doubt it. Because I think the same thing will be, I think you can't come to that office without a constituency. I think that was the weakness in the nomination of Geraldine Ferraro. And I think that the Republicans in some sense missed their opportunity when Senator Ed Brooke in Massachusetts was an elected senator. I think at that time there could have been a commitment demonstrated in the Republican Party that might have been more attractive to black leadership.
Mayor Young?
Yes.
Michael Ostrowski, Close-Up Foundation. I was wondering, you'd mentioned that so far the only blemish had been the fact that people have been locked out. The other factor that hadn't been mentioned yet was the California and I believe the Texas delegation were complaining that the convention hall wasn't wasn't adequately suited for handicap facilities. And so that, coupled with the fact that, with the reception that a gay lesbian, albeit a militant gay lesbian group faced, how do you think Atlanta appears to all those people who see it during the convention? How receptive do you think it appears to minority views?
Well, I think that last night as I was leaving, I did see a number of vehicles for the handicapped. My own mother is in a wheelchair and has been back and forth to the convention. It's you have to know your way, but it is possible to get around with limited handicaps. I mean, it's wheelchair accessible if you know where you're going and know the direction. But one of the problems we have with all this television equipment is that they pasted over a lot of the labels. So even I go in the Omni and have been going in there every, couple of times a month for the last 10 years, and I've been getting lost simply because it has changed so dramatically to accommodate the media. Yes.
Mayor Young, I'm Vivian Shapiro, Gay Cable News. We would like to know how you're going to implement a civilian review process in relationship to the act in nonviolent kissing. Is there going to be a civilian review process of what happened that day?
I think that is something that we can determine, and if there is a request for a civilian review.
I believe a request was made yesterday.
Okay. Then I'm sure that request will be honored.
And will there be a report issued back on it?
The report would be issued back, yes. But now I have appointed a civilian review panel. We attempted to get a broad base of representation from the community, and but I don't really control or influence the outcome of the views there. So I don't have any idea what they might discuss or think.
Do you have any feeling that the reaction of the police might have come from just basic homophobia, fear, and tension?
Sure, no question about that. But that's something we work on. But I would contend that we've been training police particularly to protect the homosexual community against violent assault. Police are committed to protect people against violence, and they're trained to do that. And they're trained to, to certain levels of tolerance. But that was a strain on the tolerance, not only of the police, but of this community. And I don't know that it was simply the fact of kissing, but when you put that in the context of AIDS, and when you put that in the context of all of the other things that we're trying to do in the community, well, if the intent was to strain our level of tolerance, it succeeded.
Are the police educated on AIDS?
They are.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Drawing from your diplomatic experience in the Carter administration, I was wondering if you had anything to say about the recent developments in the Persian Gulf, and whether you think the Iranians are sincere in their wishes for peace, and whether you think the Iraqis will respond to that.
Yeah, I think this war has just about, they always say that when people fight till they've had enough. And I think they've just about destroyed everything they can destroy amongst each other. And I guess that it's difficult because there are we did not have good relations with either Iran or Iraq before this conflict occurred. And in some ways, unfortunately, but in this case, fortunately for the United States, well, unfortunately, that there's nobody else in the world that has any power, has sufficient power and credibility to take on a major conflict like this and influence it.
Thank you. I have a follow-up for that. What do you think will be the role of the Persian Gulf Task Force if there is peace in the region?
I think the Persian Gulf will continue to be a region of strategic interest and concern to the United States and Europe. I think what we are going to have to do is realize that there's an intersection of geopolitical and cultural phenomena. All of our defense security was geared toward a kind of geopolitical confrontation with the Soviet Union. What we ended up having was a religious confrontation between Shiite and Sunni Muslims. And we were completely unprepared for that sort of religious and cultural tension in the region. But for everything north of the equator to the Mediterranean, there is a kind of militant Islamic fundamentalism that is going to be an increasing power factor in stability of that region. So I think the first thing a task force has to do is to begin to get a lot more in-depth understanding of the situation.
Thank you.
Let me thank you very much and urge that we'll see you tomorrow, and thank you.